All right, let me ask you a question. If an ethical hacker told your CEO tomorrow that your company has 20 to 25 critical vulnerabilities, what would that actually mean? Would it mean lost revenue? Would it mean downtime? Or would it simply be another technical report that nobody understands? Here's the problem. Most security professionals are great at finding vulnerabilities. Most testers, penetration testers, yeah, they're great at showing weaknesses, but very few people can translate those findings into something executives actually care about. What do they care about? Money, risk, business impact. In this video, I'm going to show you how me and other architects should bridge that gap. We're going to discuss how to take the technical finding and convert it into dollars and cents. We're not going to talk about how to explain risk to executives without any technical jargon. And most importantly, we're going to look at how a security architecture can cost less to implement than the damage caused by a security incident. Because at the executive level, nobody approves projects because they sound technical. They approve these projects because they understand the business value. Let's get into it. I'm Sal Cosentino. I'm an architect, cloud architect and chief executive officer. And I've been doing this for a long time. And we start looking at the vulnerabilities that don't get funded, and the business why business risk does, right? So a lot of the times you'll get people talking about, technology. We don't say zero trust, although it's a security term and technology term. We don't say that. We don't talk about CM, SEIM, and CM, SEIM, for anybody who wants to know, stands for security, information, and event management. But again, that's a solution that analyzes, that correlates these lines, but we don't say that thing, right? And a lot of these technical terms, a lot of these people, they'll use these technical terms in terms of business and without a business term and without a reason, right? Then we start talking about RBAC, right? And RBAC, you know, I'm teaching you guys this because RBAC is a role-based access control. Yeah, it's a security method, but these vulnerabilities don't get funded. Business risk does, right? So there's no sense of actually talking about that when, again, we can say these revenue costs, downtime risk, customer trust. These are things that we're going to be looking at, right? Especially when you want to get funded, right? And as architects, we don't use this as a technical jargon. We don't use acronyms. We repeat the word, right? We let the client know, we let the customer know what that is, right? And again, if the customer asks what that is, there's ways of saying these specific things, but again, you just have to have a little bit of understanding and fundamentals on how that, right? Because it's also, you can know the fundamentals, but that's not part of your job, right? You need to, especially if this needs to get funded, you need to know these specific things. Yeah, you need to know a little bit of the technology, the introduction to technologies, and how about what technologies are out there. We need to understand that. Yeah, and a lot of the times you start becoming an engineer that way, and engineering, as an engineer, to me, I used to be an engineer and now I'm an architect. I have a CEO mindset. That's where we're trying to get to, right? Um, so, we And the fact that you the client doesn't really buy the architecture, they buy what it does for them, right? So you have to understand that as an architect, my purpose of this architecture is to make your business grow without technology becoming a problem, right? So we can say that by reducing chances of your business going down and losing revenue, right? If something fails, right? We eliminate money, we eliminate cost, we eliminate unnecessary systems to reduce waste. And this is important, especially in a scenario where, we start talking about the the investment and what the investment was all about, right? So, you have 47 critical vulnerabilities. And in this instance, you know, you have 47 critical vulnerabilities, right? Your storage account is exposed, and your privilege escalation is impossible. It's possible. Now, as a business owner, yeah, okay, is that bad, right? Because they don't understand the technical risk. I don't understand the technical risk. As an architecture, again, I have experience, so I'll understand that. But there's some of these executives that want to fund you out there that, can you translate this technical risk into a business risk, right? So, as an executive, we'll say, listen, my penetration test identifies weaknesses. That can allow an attacker to access the sensitive information, cause financial loss or operations disrupt operations. Now, as an executive, yeah, I'm listening, right? But can you translate technical risk into business impact? And that's important because I can find that publicly exposed my storage is publicly exposed. My storage accounts are publicly exposed. But as a CEO, I want to know that an attacker can gain access to confidential company or customer information. And again, there's a business impact to that, right? And we go back and again we go back to there could be fines. This is important too. Fines, right? That's a business impact, right? Fines, expenses, legal expenses, like that, right? Costs such as customer notification, you know, loss of revenue, and loss of trust. Very important, right? You know, then we start talking about, privileged access controls, right? Yeah, it's a technical finding, but again, that compromises the account. I'm not going to say, oh, I've used XYZ solution to fix A, ABC solution to fix XYZ problem, right? Or I've used Microsoft to fix this problem, or I'll install AWS products onto, like, you don't say that, right? So a compromised account, for example, in this instance, could allow an attacker to take control of that ethical hacking business, right? So again, the impact on that is, you're going to get outages in production. You're going to get loss of production, productivity. You're going to get outages in production, right? And there's going to be a lot of operational disruption. You know, I I like to put, in the end. I like to put risk into dollars, and sometimes executives approve budgets using dollars. So, when you're going out there explaining this potential risk with an exposure of approximately $1.4 million, right? So current state could be whatever annually, and then you'll have your daily revenue, right? So whatever your revenue is a day per day, and again, that testers can identify a ransomware attack path, right, with a potential impact of, let's say, 7 days of downtime. How much are you going to lose, right? The proposed security architecture might cost X amount of dollars to implement, and that will significantly reduce the likelihood and impact of that event. Think about that, right? We're looking at recovery consulting, we're looking at legal reviews, we're looking at customer communication, we're also looking at incident response, right? So, can you put a dollar risk value on the risk? And a lot of CEOs and executives don't need to understand, and this is how they understand. So, for example, let's put this example here. Um, your revenue, like I said, you got your lost revenue of almost $1 million, $959,000. Let's say you had an incident response of 150,000. You had your recovery services of 200,000, your legal compliance of 100,000, right? Then you have your reputation impact. And again, that right there, yeah, it is difficult to quantify, but you'll have the right people in order to answer those questions. Then yeah, go ahead and do that, right? Right. So this project here, it will cost $1.4 million, right? And that's how we got those numbers, right? So an architecture investment, yeah, it might cost you 200 to 350,000, 250,000 to $300,000 to implement that, right? But again, you're looking at the identity controls, you're looking at this network segmentation, the monitoring, the backup improvement, and again, that's all cost of mitigation, right? So you can identify the business risk, right, with this exposure, and from a business perspective, yeah, it is less expensive to reduce the risk now than to recover from an incident later. And that's what you guys have to understand, right? So, you know, numbers matter. The numbers are part of the pudding here, and the numbers are there, right? And the role is to take the technical findings that you get from auditors and from consultants and analysts, right, from the technical side, and from ethical hackers and penetration testers can actually translate those for you in business risks, right? So I want to quantify the potential impact, financial impact. I want to quantify the operational impact. I also want to quantify the customer impact of those findings, right? And then I want to compare those costs of mitigating the risk against any potential cost of incident, right? So again, this allows for leadership, uh, and obviously this is to make informed investment decisions based on the business outcomes rather than the terminology being too technical, right? So, uh, so what's the real lesson here? Um, ethical hi- Ethical hackers, yeah, they'll find vulnerabilities, and we're going back to our question, right? The penetration testers, yeah, they'll identify weaknesses, but us as an architect, yeah, we want to translate those findings into business decisions. So those vulnerabilities by itself doesn't get funding. The technical report by itself doesn't get the executive attention. And do you want funding? Like, what gets the attention? What can you do to influence, right? And what gets the attention is understanding what happens if the business does nothing. How much revenue could be lost? How much downtime could occur? What could be the cost of recovery? What could happen to the customer's trust? And those are all business questions. Think about it. If you found value in this video, leave a comment below and tell me, how do you explain cybersecurity risk to a CEO in one sentence? I love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Keep learning, keep growing. Remember, technology doesn't get funded. Business outcomes do. I'll see you in the next video.